Jesus on the cross, or on the mountain, he said, if thou be the Son of God, change these stones into bread. The challenge is if. And in John 5, we have a testimony that when Jesus Christ says he's the Son of God, he is saying that he's God manifest in the flesh. And when he said he was his son, they wanted to stone him. The Muslims have a saying, far be it from God that he should have a son, an only begotten son. So what's happening? You were asking about the changes in the NIV, about them dropping of the Lord. Okay, well, they're changing something else that I find very, very frightening. It used to say, the first time the NIV came out, it said the only Son in John 1:14 and 1:18. Okay, now that was kind of truncated from the true Greek text, because the true Greek is mono, only. Everybody knows a mono is only, monorail, only. Genes. Anyone with any sense knows Genes, Genesis, generated, okay? The only generated, begotten Son. So there's a two-part word there, monogenes. All of the Latin manuscripts use the word that would be only begotten. And so the whole Latin church, 10,000 Latin manuscripts, are going to tell us it's only begotten Son, okay? So they wouldn't say the word begotten, and then they have this big lengthy discussion why they don't want the word begotten, because it has too much of an association with generation. But that's really what happened. The Holy Spirit overshadowed Mary, and Jesus Christ was in fact the only begotten. So they dropped begotten. All right, next printing or next copyright time that comes out, Son drops out. Son's gone. After everybody's looked at it and all the pastors look and say, well, this isn't too bad, that, begotten, I didn't know what that meant anyway, Son drops. Okay, now all the manuscripts, I won't say all, but almost every manuscript in the world says Son. I think there are a handful that say God in that text. And those are coming from what I mentioned yesterday, something like the trimorphic protonoia, these Gnostic occult documents that have a begotten God. The Gnostics had a first cause who created another God, who created another God, who created Sophia, who created the earth, and it goes on with these begotten gods. And so in the NASB, it will say the only begotten God there. It's sort of an Arian kind of a reading. That got into the Vaticanus manuscript in the 3rd century because Eusebius was a semi-Arian. They were doing lots of politics around 330. Constantine had just taken over the Diocletian Empire. Diocletian was the Roman Empire. He was killing Christians. He made a ruling that all Bibles should be burned. So that's why we don't have a lot of 1st and 2nd century Bibles. So as soon as he cleared the shelves, so to speak, of the Christians and the Bibles, Constantine comes in power and says, let's have peace. Let's not have all this fighting and killing anymore. Let's take the pagans that are worshiping Artemis and the Christians, and let's move them together and let's sort of amalgamate. He said, let's have peace. Why should we, fuss with one another? He had his own false prophet, which was Eusebius. Eusebius looked back at Origen's Platonic Bible and said, this will be perfect to amalgamate the empire. Because what Origen did is take the Christian document that the Christians could like, changed it just enough to soften it so that the pagans could agree to it or could find portions into it, or as I said yesterday, stretch certain things, and created this document, and this Vaticanus document. So that's where we have this begotten God, because there was a big battle at that century between the Arians, those who did not believe that Jesus Christ was God manifest in the flesh, and the non-Arians. And so, you know how it is today, well, Eusebius was a semi-Arian. That's how you make everyone happy. And so Origen was also somewhat of a semi-Arian. He thought that God was, Jesus Christ was subordinate to the Son. He was sort of like the Logos of the Gnostics, And so now that we're back to this, going for this one world religion, Satan never knows when he's always wanted to take over. He's the God of this world. And he doesn't know when his time's going to come, but he keeps setting things up. He did this at the turn of the century in the 1900s with Arthur Balfour, who was the Prime Minister of England, B.F. Westcott, and Henry Sedgwick. I have a big section in my book where I talk about how we have the unholy trinity there. We have Arthur Balfour, who is the Prime Minister of England, setting up the feudal League of Nations there. He's starting out to get the League of Nations together. Well, you look up Arthur Balfour in the dictionary of biographies at the library. It talks about his occultism. It talks about his seances. He was very heavily involved in seances. He had a group called the Synthetic Society. The idea was to join all the religions of the world together. And so he belonged to all these little clubs with B.F. Westcott and Henry Sedgwick. So you have these three groups of people here in England at the turn of the century. The ruling class, which is Arthur Balfour, the hardcore occultists, like Henry Sedgwick, Madame Blavatsky, people like that. And then you have the super liberal church members like B.F. Westcott and John Anthony Hort and Lightfoot and Alford and all these people. Well, very interestingly, they all belonged to the same little clubs. Okay, there was a group called the Apostles that were started by Westcott and Hort. There was another group called the Uranus. Now, Uranus simply means club in Latin, so it isn't any special secret occult word or anything. But they had a club called the Uranus. They would only allow 12 people in that club. Now, when you have a Bible study at your house, you don't say, unless you only have 12 chairs, okay? Extra people can't come. The Christians don't do that, okay? But it's been very typical with occult groups. We'll just have 12. So they had 12 members. They've got this the occult hierarchy. Henry
Does that have something to do with the 12 apostles?
I think it's just sort of like a satanic blasphemous kind of thing. Let's copy God. I will be like the Most High, he said. But we have these men getting together. Westcott taking that Vaticanus manuscript and changing what the church had used. Remember, I talked before about continuity, okay? Those 5,000 manuscripts that we have for the Greek text all agree with the King James. We just have these few that don't. And after Constantine created the Vaticanus manuscript, it sort of sat buried, all right? The only thing that was used for was Jerome used it to translate his Vulgate text, okay? And basically, since the Church of Rome really didn't use the scriptures that much, it just sort of sat. It really wasn't in use by Christians 5th century, 6th century, 7th century, 8th century, 9th century, 10th century. Okay, the true Christians, we'll say starting from Antioch, moving up into northern Italy, into the Waldensian Valley there, took the Antiochian Bible, the Greek text, translated into a kind of a rough old Latin text, okay? Then you have a Waldensian preacher named Olivetan. He took that old Latin text, translated it into French, and so we have the French Olivetan Bible, which the King James translators used to translate the King James. And Olivetan was a relative of Calvin, John Calvin. And so Calvin took Olivetan's French, used it for his English translation.
Let's stop right there.
Okay.
And we'll go to a break, and we'll find out more about Westcott and Hort and
Calvin. She's got the Calvin.
And that translation that somehow was
Right.
a group of 12 that somehow did some sinister things there. At least it appears to be that way. We'll be right back.
Today's Action 60s gift offer